Hello and welcome to R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm Kayla McGowan, Editor-in-Chief, and today we're diving in to why restoration contractors are leaving money on the table and what you can do about it. Today's special guest is Genesis Brown. She's the founder and CEO of Smart Claims Solutions. She's been in the industry since 2012, and she's scaled from handling 100 claims per week to over 1,000 with her and her team. She loves to share with the industry so they can enhance their business as well. Please welcome Genesis.
Hello. Thank you, Kayla. How are you?
Good. How are you? Thank you. I know it's been crazy trade show season, and we're kind of able to just kind of dive into this. This is a very hot topic for the industry as a whole, so I think this is very timely. So I want to just thank you for jumping in on this topic and help our industry, move forward with some of our pain points.
Yes, definitely. This is something that I am very passionate about, and it's the reason why have stayed in the industry for so long. I started back in 2012, and this was supposed to be a stepping stone for me, this industry. But I've stayed. I studied, I got my degree in accounting, and the people that I was working with, they ended up opening a restoration company, and it was a playground for me in terms of the administrative aspect of things, the amount of paperwork, documentation, and we pretty much have to dot our I's and cross our T's and just have very, very good documentation in order to pretty much survive in this industry. Otherwise, I feel as though you get really busy and you think like, oh, I'll get paid for that. I'll get paid for that later. But one thing that we know is that insurance companies love to delay or stall or underpay. And so if we're not keeping our documentation organized and having as much information in it as possible, then we end up leaving money on the table.
Yeah, you said that really well. I definitely think like controlling our narrative is a really big part of what we do, and what you're talking about, documentation and just process and procedure is something that we can control to help that process go a little bit more smoothly, right? So I know that you guys really focus on common mistakes and how you can fix those common mistakes when documenting claims. So how can we actually reduce those errors, and how much is it costing people? Because I don't think people really talk about how much it actually costs if you're not doing what you should do, right? As far as documentation, processes and procedures in the claims process. So can you dive into what are the common mistakes and what it could potentially cost a contractor?
So the most common mistake that we encounter is lack of pictures. I cannot tell you how many conversations we have with insurance adjusters where they say, I see your billing for this, I don't see the picture. And it can happen to anyone, especially when you are dealing with hurricane work or a lot of heavy rain and you're just overwhelmed. It happens, but it's building that muscle memory when things are slow. And so figuring out a way of, okay, I arrive to the property. What's the first thing that I do? I take a picture of the outside of the house. Before I walk in, I greet the homeowner and then explain everything to them that I need to explain to them. And then I take a picture of everything that I am seeing before I start. And then when they start doing their investigation with their moisture meter, thermal imaging, etc., they also take pictures. We have a lot of contractors when they're first starting out that they say, no, but I took pictures with the thermal imaging camera. And we say, I'm sure you did. You would not have known the extent of the water damage if you hadn't, but where are the pictures? And so it depends. Different contractors charge for the thermal imaging camera a different amount, but it can be $150 to $300 that you're leaving on the table. Times every job that you do, that can easily add up. And it can be also, or it's as simple as not taking a picture from the overview of the room, where if the insurance adjuster doesn't see all of the contents that you moved, so I have a bookcase full of books on the corner over here. And if I were to take a picture just from here, you would never know that I had a bunch of books that if I had water damage in this office, they would have had to move them. And so it's those little things that matter. And we leave money on the table by not documenting.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think we say, pictures are worth a thousand words in some cases. Pictures are worth thousands of dollars in some cases, not maybe in one job, but collectively over several jobs, especially if you're utilizing like your moisture meters and things like that, thermal imaging and all of that, right? I think there's just some significant repetitive things that we do in the field. And if you're not doing it on one job, chances are you're not doing it on all of your jobs, and that money will add up over time. So why doesn't I guess we know that there's like third party estimating and in-house estimating. What have you found with what you guys do opposed to somebody in-house? I know sometimes if we look at the big picture, we have somebody who's quote unquote the estimator, but they're also maybe the PM. And so they're not able to solve the back and forth in a timely manner, which causes delays or even denials. So what success have you guys found, and why is it important to look at the lay of the land before saying, "Oh, I'm just going to let my PM do that," right? Like how big are the delays or the denies that you guys are seeing when people have in-house and they're utilizing somebody who wears many hats in their business?
Well, that's a great question, and I love it because I was in-house. I started in a restoration company, and I wore so many hats. I wore the accountant, bookkeeper, office manager, party planners, office supplies, drop the checks off at the bank, talk to the technicians, hiring, like not the interviewing portion of it, but the documentation aspect of it. And my bosses didn't just have a restoration company, they also had other companies. So I did a lot of things for those. And so when we first started out, we didn't have, the constant flow of jobs that a restoration company expects, but eventually we did. And so if I was busy talking with an insurance adjuster and I finished a conversation, but we then had a call from someone else, I needed to get that call right away. But I'm on the phone on hold. I've already held on the phone for 30 minutes. I am almost there. Usually with Universal, it was a long hold back then. I am not giving up my spot in that holding line until in order to take that other call. And we didn't have more people to do that. And so that's when we realized we need help. Like we need to hire more people, which we did, and make sure that we are always available to answer that phone and take those calls, because insurance adjusters are on the road, they're doing a million things themselves. And the way that I would explain, or that I explain to people, is they see one file. If it doesn't have everything, they'll move it to the next. And then they just continue piling on until they find a file that's complete. And so what I have seen, and sorry if I'm going around in a circle, but what I have seen is that when we first started out, the technician was the estimator. And if I needed him, I didn't have the knowledge when I started initially. So I needed him to explain to me why we had placed that machine, or why he had removed so much drywall, or why he didn't remove the drywall and the baseboard. But he couldn't do that because he was busy talking to a current customer and homeowner. And so we were stuck in the waiting game when my technician was available, who was also the estimator and could explain to me why he had done what he had done, so I could then relay the message to the insurance adjuster, who then I would have to play phone tag with because he wasn't always at the office to take my call. And so that's part of the reason why Smart Claims was born. And giving that like collections administrative office to restoration contractors who where the only thing that we're doing is the file and the collections. We're not out on the field. We're not doing different things so that we have that personalized attention and we can get back to them right away. So I hope that answered your question.
It did. I think that just goes to show what a majority of people are dealing with, especially if they're a smaller, business. I think we see that too. It's kind of like there's a couple of people in the office who are like quote unquote jack of all trades. And I think you said it best. Most times, people who are actually handling the administrative side of the file are not in the field. They're just taking what they're seeing and really talking the adjuster through it, right? And so if you have to wait, your callback time or interaction time with the adjuster is a lot longer than it should be. But with you guys, like you said, we are centralized on that. We focus on that specifically. So emails that come in or calls that come in are answered right away. And it's easier to call back. And even if you do have to play a little bit of phone tag, which we know is the thing, because like you said, adjusters are working probably 60 plus files at any given time. And so you have to realize that if you're doing this, there's probably about 60 other people who are doing the same thing that you're doing, right? And like them, we're only one person. So, I think that's really key. And speaking of all of this, I know that both sides on our side and the adjuster side, a lot of us are overworked. We have a lot of work. And so, there is a almost like a stall period or maybe reduce payouts. So, how can we, as restoration professionals, kind of take charge of that and not really push back, but collaborate efficiently and effectively? Because I think at the end of the day, our end goal is the same: take care of the homeowner, right? So, what are some of the things that we can do better aside from documentation? Have you guys seen success with like a certain style of email or maybe the total file package that you put together? Because I think if you look at the industry as a whole, we all do things differently. They all have the same thing, but maybe there's something that you guys have found great success that reduces that time, and helps maximize the claim to where it should be.
That's a great question. So you're right. Every restoration contractor does it differently. We all want to serve the homeowner, but we all want to add our own like flavor to it. And that's totally fine. But what I would say every single file needs is the basic information, the contract, the signed and dated contract by both parties, the W-9 with the updated address of where you want payment to be issued, the estimate or the oh my goodness, the line item itemized. There we go. The itemized estimate slash invoice, pictures of everything that's included in that invoice, the moisture readings, moisture hygrometer readings, if that's a water loss, and for a mold loss, then the mold report if it's available from the third party mold assessor, and pretty much that's the basics. It's all of the documentation with all of the information. And when we do things that are out of the ordinary or going to be different than, say, the cookie cutter template that insurance companies sometimes want to give us, where they say, oh, we only pay for 2 days of a dry out, then we need to be able to explain and show them, no, we were not able to leave our equipment for 2 days because the property was not dry. And here is the proof. So ensuring that we have that proof is how we get the insurance adjuster to just not be able to refute anything. They may refute, say, the size of the dehumidifier, but they can't refute the hours or the amount of days that you were there.
Yeah, that's key too, because I think we have to remember when we're talking to those who are our adjusters, they haven't been in our shoes, right? So I think if we are able to tell a story, because that's what we're doing actually here, is we're telling a story. There was a problem, this was the solution, and this is how we did it essentially. And I think for people who don't really know exactly what we do, they're trained on specifics that are outside of what we do, right? Every circumstance we handle is not quote unquote by the book, cookie cutter, like same instance for every job. There are exceptions to what we do. And I think in order for us to successfully tell that story, we have to show with documentation, and photos, and just even taking that time to explain, well, here's why we couldn't just leave after 2 days, because then it could lead to mold, right? I think that's the other thing is like you could have an additional problem if you didn't want to let us come in for 3 to 5 days or whatever the case may be. So with that being said, I think we've talked about documentation, and I just would like to hear a story that really just sticks with you where, documentation made a huge difference in not only the payout, but the time to close, right? I think that's the other thing is we hear people talking about 90, 120-day plus close times on files. Is there one that particularly sticks out to you where documentation just really put the whole story together and you're like, wow, if every claim could be that way, things would happen a lot faster?
Oh gosh, it's difficult to come up with just one case, but I do remember um, a couple of years ago, we had a storm in northern Florida and it was busy. But thankfully, we had this one client who he is very organized and he would call me for anything and everything, which I loved because he would give me things the way that I needed them. And because of that, when we submitted the files to the insurance companies, we would have payments for him within 2 weeks during a hurricane season or period. And it was for 90% of it, or like, yeah, almost full payment, 90% of the invoice. And it really truly was because he took his time in at the house and documenting the case. And so we were able to take everything that he gave us and put it together. And like you said, give the insurance adjuster a story that makes sense and that they have no reason to deny. So that really is a story that stands up for me.
I would definitely say too, just to your point about that, even if you're in a busy season or not, taking the time to one, either have a checklist or have great SOPs that help you when you get back to your desk, not spend so much time getting everything together. So then when you do hand it off to somebody like yourselves, it's easy for you guys to put together the file, but also be able to tell the story efficiently and effectively. You're not trying to jumble through stuff and try and say like, oh, what day was this or anything like that. I think that's also a key point, a pain point for when we utilize and outsource, right? Because half the battle is having everything that you need, but the other half is making sure that it makes sense to whoever is helping you. And if it doesn't make sense to those who are actually handling this every day, it's not going to make sense to an adjuster. So I think that's a good story to tell, honestly, because everybody that touches anything that has to do with the file can make or break the success and close time of that specific claim in general. So my last question to you is, how does outsourcing to somebody like Smart Claim Solutions help restoration contractors scale without increasing their overhead? I think that's a common question. So how can you kind of just dive into that for me a little bit?
Well, so I we go back to a little bit the beginnings of smart claims. One of the reasons why or how we established ourselves was you only hire us when you need us. And so I remembered how difficult it was for my bosses to have zero cases, zero claims. And I was sitting at the office doing nothing. I mean, nothing for the restoration company. I was doing a lot for the other companies, but for the restoration company, I was just sitting there doing nothing. And so, some people might be totally okay with that. I just felt like, oh my gosh, like this is not sustainable. And then having my accounting background, and the experience that I have in the industry, cash flow is the biggest headache for restoration contractors. Everybody wants to grow, but a lot of people lack the knowledge on managing their cash flow efficiently. And we already know when we're dealing with the insurance company, it's not you have the money right away. Something is going to happen. Even when it's perfect, the insurance adjuster got sick, they quit, the homeowner decides that they just don't want to work with you anymore. There's so many variables that I feel it's difficult for people to hire a big collections team that includes the estimator, the person that creates the file, quality control, submits the file, follows up on the file, negotiates the file, follows up on the check of the file, documentation. If it's denied or it needs alternate resolution methods, then you have someone else to do that. So in that sense, we have grown our team because we handle a lot of different clients and they are specialized in everything I just said. So they solely focus on that one thing. So we have a person that focuses on checks. That's all they do. Why? Because if I have that person focusing on negotiations, what's going to happen? They're going to be more focused on negotiations or more focused on checks, and one of the two is going to stop. And so when you are growing and scaling and you have a lot of volume, great. Maybe you can sustain the overhead in your office. But when you're in an industry where it's maybe you have a lot of cases, maybe you don't, because the only thing that you do is restoration, then you benefit from having a team where you pay for what you need and you don't have that headache and overhead of, oh my gosh, I have so-and-so sitting at the office and they're not doing anything. So that's the benefit.
Yeah, I was definitely going to say it allows your own business to focus on, and by your, I mean the restoration side. They're able to focus on, taking care of their customers, all while their admin side is still being handled. And like you said, your team, they specialize in specific things. So it actually makes you guys more efficient, right? So you're not juggling and, like you said, I think you said it really well, is like if you're doing two things, one is going to get a little bit more attention than the other. And that's just normal. I mean, that's natural. You can't say, oh, I do 50-50 when really, if you're working on negotiations, it could potentially be 70-30, right? You could be on the phone 70% of the time and then collecting the check only 30% of the time. And what does that mean? Well, something's being neglected. And so I think for utilizing somebody like Smart Claim Solutions, it allows restoration contractors to focus on their customers, focus on their day to day. When there is a storm, right, or a hurricane, they can worry about deployment opposed to handling all of the back end stuff. And that's kind of where you guys come in. And not to mention, you've been in the industry, so you guys have the knowledge of what to expect and how to talk adjusters through and what needs to be in a file. So I think that's really key. And most importantly, the restoration contractor doesn't have to hire all of these people for specific tasks, right? They get to you guys and your team divvies it up and takes care of it. So with that being said, I think you shared a ton of information today, and I think that most of the industry is struggling with this right now. So any questions that they have, I'm sure they can just reach out to you. You guys are very accessible. And you guys are all great to talk to as well. So I want to say thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Ask the Expert. And as always, everybody, take care.